Hello, my name is Stephanie Nicole, and I'm the Acting Gallery Manager at the Aurora Cultural Center. Thank you for joining me and our fellow students from the Mayor Celebration of Youth Arts 2022. We are going to be discussing the art practice, why they created these art pieces, and where they're going to go from here. So let us get started by introducing the artists who are joining us. Let's start with Lexi.
Hi, I'm Lexi. I'm a student at St. Maximilian Kolbe. I am in Mr. Viaz's art and art design classes, and I have included both my self-portrait piece and my social justice piece in the art show.
Thank you. Let us go next to Alfie.
Hi, my name's Alfie. I'm in grade 12 at St. Maximilian Kolbe. I'm in both the art and design classes with Mr. Riaz, and I've included my large sketchbook task and a self-portrait kind of statement piece.
Thank you, Alfie. And let us now turn to Christian.
Hi, I'm Christarn. I'm also a grade 12 at St. Maximilian Kolbe. My teachers are Mr. Viaz for visual arts and visual design, and then I have Ms. Froyo for photography. And the art that I'm including in this show is my self-portrait, my social justice piece, and my photography ISP.
And we're going to go into details of what all those works are and why you created them. So I'm turning now back to Lexi, and tell us a little bit about why you create art.
So I think I'm just a very expressive person. If you are friends with me, you know that I'm easily vulnerable, I have a lot of emotions. And so I think that art is just my outlet to turn those emotions into something visual and something that I can be proud of and look back on.
Wonderful. And we're so excited to be able to present your work this way. So tell us a little bit more about the works that are included in this exhibition. Why did you create your self-portrait with double little horns?
So I feel like a lot of people might interpret it as if I kind of dislike myself or maybe like demonizing myself in a way, but in reality, at the time when I created it, I was really struggling with mental health and anxiety, and I found that most of my anxiety was rooted in just my own insecurities and stuff that I didn't really have to be worried about. And I found that it created these mental boundaries for me where even just like going to school or taking a test would be difficult for me. And yeah, it was really a struggle. So I think that putting it into a visual piece like that was kind of an outlet and kind of helped me express it, since at the time I was really struggling to express it to others through words.
Thank you so much for sharing that background, as well as being able to present the work in a public sphere. It's quite courageous for you to present that. It makes me think that your next piece, the one with the face coming off, there might be some more in there. Can you describe that work a little bit more? What is it made out of? Is it pencil crayon?
It was actually done digitally, and then I got it printed. So my main sort of media that I use is digital. And yeah, that piece pretty much revolves around a topic called compulsory heterosexuality. And it's an experience that a lot of queer women go through, where they feel as though their identity isn't valid because our world is very patriarchal and male-centric. So when you feel as though your life isn't centered around that, it can be very hard to sort of deal with or cope with.
Thank you for introducing that term to me, and that now I'm remembering what that image looks like, and I'm getting a different sense of feeling from it. So I really appreciate that background. Is this something that you were researching or that you're feeling yourself?
It's something that I have personally gone through, and I know that a lot of my other friends who also sort of share the same identity with me go through it as well. And I think it's very common in queer women, but it isn't talked about enough. And so I think that making a statement about it, even if it just reaches maybe like 100 people, I think that that would be beneficial to the way that people look at oppression, specifically towards Sapphic women.
Thank you so much for sharing it and having the courage to want to make that difference within our community and have that conversation with Aurora audience. Is there anything else that you'd like to add about your work? Something that we don't know about, or maybe your own art practice? Perhaps talk about that microphone in front of you.
So I kind of like dabble in a lot of different art. So I have a really big interest in music as well. So I sing a little bit. I play guitar, if you can see in the background. And I think that music does actually come into play in my visual art pieces because there's so much inspiration you can take from other forms of art. And I find that freedom so refreshing, especially in my life. And it's sort of therapeutic in a way. So art is something that I personally think is a necessity for me. And yeah, I think it's definitely part of my drive.
Wow. I'm so glad that we are having this conversation, and I look forward to hearing maybe a little bit of singing in the future. I've been watching your peers in this interview, and they're nodding their head that perhaps they've heard these stories with you and they've been creating alongside you. So I turn to Alfie now to ask about your work and perhaps how does it feel to be working in a community such as these peers? I want to call them colleagues, but they're your peers, they're your fellow artists.
Yeah, so one thing I really, really like about my art class is it's such a safe and free space to express how you feel, to be who you are, and that's something that's very important in my art. I take a lot of inspiration from my emotions, considering I'm someone who like feels a lot and also feels a lot of emotion. So a lot of the times my art, it comes from a very vulnerable place, like Lexi mentioned in her art. And to be able to express that with everyone in the art room and now to the people of Aurora is just very special.
I'm feeling so honored to be sharing these stories with you right now, and knowing that you've had that safe space within Mr. Viez and Mrs. Froyo's classrooms is really important, and why we bring this annual show to the public every year. Can you talk a little bit more about your particular works, whichever one you want to start with, either your drawing or your ink drawing?
Okay, so to start, let's talk about the graphite drawing. It's something very personal at this point in my life. I just recently turned 18, so that's like a big thing in like our society, like, wow, you're an adult now. But I feel like a lot of times we struggle with our identity as we grow up because in society we're told, oh, you shouldn't like this or you should do this, and like it's a whole like struggle. And a lot of the times we like look back on who we are as children and think about those moments where we're just like unapologetically ourselves and just free to do what we want and to be happy. And so in that art piece, it's kind of like me protecting my younger self because I don't know, sometimes things can be really, really hard and you just look to your younger self and you're like, I want to protect you, I want to care for you, and I want to remind you that no matter what happens in your life, to like always be yourself and let yourself shine through.
That's beautiful. And the imagery has two symbols for me, and I wondered what they represented for you. There's the angel wings, and now I can understand that that's a protective symbol. but there's also a flower, and it seemed like it was a very particular flower, and then there's like petals around. Did they represent something in particular?
Yes, for sure. So the lotus flower in Chinese culture, which is my culture, is representative of overcoming challenges in life and going through difficult times to blossom. And so I feel like with the petals falling down and me, my younger self holding a lotus flower, it's almost symbolic of change and like overcoming and like growing. And I just want to add with the wings, even though it symbolizes protection, it also symbolizes freedom. We know wings symbolize like taking flight. So I feel like as you grow older, you learn to spread your wings and just be who you are.
Absolutely. It is such a lesson for those who perhaps have been a little bit further away from grade 12 to remind ourselves. I think that's a wonderful thing about this exhibition as well, is that those who've been out of high school for a little bit can come back and look at how open you can be in creating your work. I think that your generation, your class, and your fellow peers within other schools, you're so generous in your stories, not just by talking to me in these interviews, but also through your creation process. So thank you for bringing that mirror forward. Would you like to talk about your other work too?
Yeah, for sure. So my other work is completely just about feeling. There's no like big like story behind it, except I visualize a lot of how I feel. So I wanted to portray that into this art piece of a woman floating in space. I think in my most difficult moments, sometimes I feel like I'm floating in darkness, almost like lost in space and like trapped. However, it was an important element to add the little stars around her to symbolize that no matter how lost you may be or how you may feel, there is light along the way that will guide you. And so in the art piece, you can see the light kind of go outside of the jar that she's in to symbolize that one day she will float away into a happier place.
I feel like that one is one I can't not have a tear for. It's beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing those stories and the practice in which you came forward to creating. I'm feeling that there's going to be more stories, and I turn to Christarn about your work now. Quite larger works in comparison to Alfie's, maybe comparative in size to Lexi's printed works, but yours are a little bit different in subject matter. Would you like to go about those?
For sure. So I'll start with my self-portrait. I titled it The Art of Concealing, and I took inspiration from a point in my life where I felt like nobody really knew what was going on inside my mind or even in just reality. At that point in my life, I was in grade 8, I had no friends in my class, and it may seem like a silly subject, but I felt so lonely, and my friends even made fun of me. They're like, "Oh, we're in a different class than you. That's kind of funny." But to me, I felt like I was suffocated inside. Um, and I really didn't tell anyone about this until the point that I created this art piece. And the art piece symbolizes how I never showed my true emotions to anyone. Um, the flowers and the foliage on the outside of my face represents how I present myself to people, not only then, but still now. I tend to put on a front, show that I'm happy and positive to everyone. But on the inside, there are different feelings going on. And the bloody tears represent that my emotions are struggling to be concealed, and they're just coming out because they can't be concealed anymore. And with this piece, I think a lot of people can relate to it, no matter what situation they've gone through. We're all putting on this sort of front just to, I guess, appeal to everyone else. So this was a piece that I really wanted everyone to take the time to think about and reflect upon with themselves and their emotions.
Thank you. I feel like when I look at the piece, I really do have a sense of pain, because you represent the blood quite well. It looks painful to be crying blood.
Yeah.
These beautiful flowers around you. So there's quite a juxtaposition. There's a paradox of imagery that I wanted. It's so pretty. It's such a pretty, your palette is pretty. It's pink and it's a light green and then blood.
Yeah.
So I really do get the sense, I think you were quite successful with what you wanted to do with it. And then I know because we installed your other piece right beside it. The palette was just so complementary to one another, although the subject matter is quite different. Would you like to talk about your other painting?
Sure. So that one is called Happy Birthday. In writing, happy would be crossed out. So this piece depicts a woman giving birth, and there is a large crowd of people surrounding her inside of her hospital room and outside through a window you can see on the right side of the painting. And there is also 3 men who are government officials that are holding this group of people back. And basically what's going on here is this woman never wanted to have a child, but she is pregnant and about to give birth. And that is because she wasn't able to have an abortion, because where she's from, abortions are illegal, or just for some reason she can't get one. And that's the case for many women. And it's a very scary thing to think about, especially for me as a woman who's able to get pregnant. If I have gotten pregnant and didn't have the option to abort my child if I needed to, that's a very scary thing for me to think of, and for many women as well. So in the painting, that group of people are trying to help this woman, although it's kind of ironic because they can't anymore. She's about to give birth, but it's the intention that counts. And the 3 government officials are basically enforcing the illegality of abortion. And when I look at this piece, I really wanted people to ponder what was going on. I didn't want them to initially get what the idea was. I've heard many different perspectives on this piece, but I really wanted them to think about what this was. And once they understood the meaning behind it, then they would reflect on abortion as a whole.
Interesting. It took me a moment to get into it myself in terms of what you were trying to talk about, because you don't place any faces. It's a very figurative, very almost just a 1 inch away from being completely abstract. You do have form, but you don't have any faces or features. And I find that very interesting because that allows for a wide range of application for themes or for theories. It's just it's such a good thing to know what you intended with it, so that I can look at it now and have another thought process about the work. And then you have another work in the show because you're in 3 classes. Describe your 3rd piece that's in the exhibition.
For sure. So my 3rd piece is titled Hidden Properties. It's a triptych of 3 different photos that I was inspired by another artist. His name was Shikano Tsukyagaki, and he takes a lot of still life photos. And he plays a lot with shadows and reflections, especially with glass objects. And I wanted to sort of emulate that. But with my piece, in the editing process, I chose to play with colors and sort of extract the colors out of the glass that you don't see in real life. And the piece is titled Hidden Properties because of that extraction of the color there. And with this piece, I decided to take photos of still life because to me, still life is very intimate, especially if you place a story with it. For a lot of people, when they look at still life paintings or photos, whatever the case may be, to them, they just see a bowl of fruit or a vase of flowers. But to me, I see a story behind these objects, and that's what I was trying to allude to in my triptych.
quite a powerful piece in its simplicity in form. The colors are an invitation, and there's a lot of dynamic like angles within the image, so that it's quite an interesting piece to spend a time looking at. And I'm looking forward to seeing who, when they visit the gallery, get attracted to and what they get attracted to. Thank you for sharing your process and your inspirations. I want to give you an opportunity, and Lexi an opportunity, to comment about how it is to work in a community in your classroom. Would you like to comment on that?
Definitely. I loved working with everyone in our class. It was really nice because it was such a small group, so it was really intimate, and it was such a positive environment. You know, we were always uplifting each other and helping each other out with our art. It was just such a safe and positive space for us to be in, especially during critiques when we were explaining our art pieces that had a lot of deep meaning. It was just so easy for us to be vulnerable and open with each other, and that's what I really liked about working with this group of people.
It's so nice to hear that your community was growing within that classroom, or classrooms, multiple, and that we have this opportunity to present those vulnerabilities in another safe spot, that you guys feel comfortable, that you all feel comfortable presenting that work within the Aurora Cultural Center. Lexi, would you like to comment on the same question?
Yeah, for sure. So like Christarn and Alfie both said, it was such a nice space to work in, like felt completely safe and comfortable for all of us. And it was just very free of judgment. And I think that's very rare, especially in high school where we're all kind of insecure and just struggling to deal with our own emotions. So it was nice to have that freedom and kind of connection between all of us. And I think that it was definitely beneficial for all of us and almost therapeutic in a sense. So yeah, I really loved it.
I'm so glad that you all came together this evening to talk about your work, and then talk about your experience about working together in a classroom. And it wasn't a classroom anymore, it became your own community, and we're able to bring that into the exhibition for another wonderful experience for the public of Aurora and beyond to come into and learn about. Is there anything else that you'd like the public to know about your work, about your process or the medium? Anything else that you'd like to add for tonight?
I just want to add, I think whether you're like objectively good at art or not, like, because it's such a subjective like subject, I think art is about like expressing who you are. And we can see this even here, like all three of us have put so much of who we are into our art. And I think that's what art is about, because when you put yourself into art, people can feel that and people can appreciate that, like we did in the art critiques inside our classroom. So yeah.
Thank you so much for adding that, Alfie. I will say it is, again, I think I've said it already earlier, that it's an honor to be bringing these stories forward into this presentation. And I'm so excited to have people respond to your work. And it's not just your work, it's your stories and it's your perspectives. And I'm so honored by your courageous steps to bring it forward, because it could have been as easily of, I'll leave it at home, I'll keep it at home. But you've decided to bring it to the Aurora Cultural Center. So thank you so much for all of your time, for all your commitment, and for your perspectives upon the world. Thank you for joining me this evening.